Hi, I'm Alicia Michelle, best-selling author, ICF certified coach, and neurocoach. I love helping Christian women discover practical ways to manage emotions with science and scripture so they can live with more calm, more clarity, more confidence. I'm so glad you're here. Find a cozy spot and let's get started. Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Christian Mindset Coach with me, Alicia Michelle. I'm telling you, I can walk into any room of women at any moment, and there will be at least one of these things that people will talk about in their conversations. They will either talk about overanalyzing something and they're frustrated about that, or they'll talk about overthinking something, or they'll talk about overexplaining or overapologizing. They will bring this up in some way. Do you not hear this too? This is just what happens all the time for us. And I'm curious, as we think about these patterns, what is really going on here? Have we stopped to think about why we do these things and what really is happening here? Today, we're going to talk about them, and we're going to separate out what they are individually, right? Like defining what each of these things are. And then we're going to talk about what's really the pattern underneath. So let's talk about that. I'm not going to hide the tagline here. If you've been following along here, you can probably guess what that tagline is, that people pleasing is the root of a lot of these patterns. And a lot of times it's a deeper issue of people pleasing, of fear, of safety, of identity, of being accepted, of all these fears. And these are the coping mechanisms that we've developed that have become very normal and very part of just what we do every day without thinking about it. And even to where we just say, I'm overanalyzing it again, and we just normalized it. And so I want to just call that out today and say, this doesn't have to be a normal part of our behavior. And there's a different way. So first, let's just talk about what each of them are. Overthinking is something that happens in our mind. Overexplaining is what comes out of our mouth. And overapologizing is how we try to prevent or repair that disapproval. I have a feeling that you might see yourself in this pretty quickly, because I too fall into these patterns from time to time, replaying the conversation, rewriting what you said. How many times have you written a text and then you're like, oh, darn it. You erase it, or you do other words, and then you send another one, or maybe you send something else to clarify because they didn't answer straight away, or maybe you say something normal and then you're immediately apologizing for it. Oh my gosh, these feel like separate things, but they're deeply connected. They're not random habits. They're part of that same pattern. Each one has a link to a deeper issue of what we're really trying to do in the moment. And there are these deeper patterns that we have to go, if that's happening over and over, is that something that God is saying, maybe there's a different way for me to deal with it? So if we look at overthinking, again, the things that happen in our mind, we're replaying the conversation, we're analyzing the tone, we're wondering if someone is upset, wondering what we should say, wondering if what we said was too much, wondering if we could restructure the conversation. We've all done this so many times. This is our brain trying to anticipate and to prevent that disapproval. It's trying to make sure that we aren't taking up too much space, we aren't offending, we aren't being difficult. Now, we have to be careful, because do we want to be people who are challenging, difficult, not kind, people who are rude? Of course we don't. We want to keep a check on that. That's God's calling us to be His light and His love in this world. But if we live in a state of continual, oh my gosh, am I like this? It's not because, and a lot of times we'll find it's not because we want to necessarily represent ourselves. It's that for Christ, we can say that on the outside, and I agree we do, right? Because you're like, I do want to represent Christ, of course. But is there a little bit, even a tiny twinge of, yeah, but I really just don't want to upset them. I really just don't want to make them mad. I really want them to like me. I really don't want to cause a problem. I really don't want them to talk about me. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the troublesome person. It's all the time. I was at the dentist the other day. I'm not going to get into all the stuff that happened, but I will say this. There was something that happened at the dentist that it was not okay how they handled my treatment. An older version of me would have spent a lot of time trying to just push down the anger, frustration, and just whatever that I felt after this injustice, let's say, happened, okay? And I got mad. And like I said, an older version of me would have been like, oh, don't say that because you don't want to be a troublesome person. What if I did say something wrong? What if I did not communicate that correctly? What if this is my fault? We do that when we have these people-pleasing tendencies. We pull it inside and we try to think, oh, it's me. It's me. Because we feel like we can handle it if it's us. If it's outside of us, ooh, that's scary. That's so scary because we don't have control over it at that point. So we know, even if it doesn't feel good to suck it all up inside, we're like, this is just how I've dealt with it. If I give it out to someone else and I let them potentially be mad at me, it's like almost like I've lost control. So that's how we kind of justify these behaviors of, I'm just going to overthink it and I'm going to try to protect myself so that there is no tension. There is, or at least I'm doing everything in my part to keep that tension from happening. So we might overthink it afterwards. We might overthink it going into it, or we might overexplain. Do you do this? I can't tell you how many times I've done this, and God has just had to call me out and be like, you don't have to give that much detail. You don't have to justify your decision. You don't have to explain everything. You don't have to tell that person, well, I'm sick and I can't come because I've been really struggling with this thing. And I really just think, I'm sorry, I'm unable to make it today because I'm under the weather. I don't have to explain or justify. And part of that comes from that deeper pattern of, I need to defend myself, justify me being imperfect, taking up space in the world, having potentially a different opinion than you, potentially upsetting you. This is how we're trying to control how we're perceived. We're trying to control what someone else might be thinking of us. I think a huge blessing that God gave us is that we don't know whatever people are saying about us at a given moment. There's this really cool moment that I always love in one of the Chronicles of Narnia books where there is a magic book that Lucy finds. And in this magic book, it will tell you whatever you want to know. And so Lucy says to this book, I want to know what my friends think of me. Do you remember this part? It's in one of the movies too. And she sees these little scenes come up in the book, like little videos, so to speak. At least that's how it's portrayed in the movie. And there are people talking about her. Some of her best friends are saying some things about her. And she's just, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're saying that. And from that person too, who does she think she is? And there is a video, I'm going to use the word video, a scene that comes up inside the book that's of Aslan. And he's growling. And it's like, he's saying, look, I purposefully give you a vision into what other people think of you, but I also limit that. I limit it on purpose because you don't need to know all the things. It will distract you. It will keep you in this people pleasing. I want you to just look straight at me. I want you to follow me and let people think what they're going to think. The thing is, we can say, well, I'm just not going to care what anybody thinks. I'm just going to be myself. Yeah, you know what? You can say that. But how many of us say that? And then we're like, oh, but wait a minute. Let me make sure she understands. And we go back on that. So when we are in these patterns, we have to ask, what is causing me to do that? What is underneath it? Now, over apologizing. This is the saying we're sorry unnecessarily, apologizing for having a need. Oh my gosh, like I did this for so long. Smoothing things over quickly. This to me is I shouldn't be a bother. If you ever felt like that, I learned growing up in different ways that if I asked for something, it could be perceived as if I was a bother. And I was so hurt by the fact that I could be a bother that I just decided I'm just going to take care of everything myself, right? Because I don't want to be a bother to anyone. And so if there is a moment where I need to step up and ask, it can feel really uncomfortable. Another example of this, the other day I was in a yoga class, a hot yoga class, and I forgot my mat. There's 2 different locations, and I'd gone to the studio the day before, and I went to one location, and I'd left my mat there because I was talking to the teacher and everything, and my brain shut off, and I left my mat there. So I came the next morning to the other class at the other location. I was like, wait a minute, where's my mat? It's always in the trunk of my car. It's 6 a.m. class. I have a pattern set down. I don't have to think. I open my trunk, get my mat, and walk inside, right? And my mat wasn't there. And the teacher gave me a loaner mat. And so it was a different kind of mat than I normally have. I was moving all over on the mat, and she's like, oh, if you need help with that, let me know. And so I was sitting there on the mat. We were in the middle of class, and I had that feeling of I'm sitting here. I know that this mat is not working for me. If you do yoga, that you know how you're in certain positions and your hands and your feet kind of have to stick on the mat or you're slipping all over the place. I was slipping all over the place. And I was like, oh gosh, but she's teaching and I don't want to interrupt her. I don't want to be a bother. And then I felt this voice inside of me say, why is this a bother? You could get hurt if you slipped. And in fact, I am working through a frozen shoulder right now. So what if you slipped and hurt your shoulder more? It's not a bother. She had said, if you need help with a little towel over the mat or something, please ask me. And so I sat there. I had that dilemma in my head because, again, old people-pleasing patterns was that. But I was like, no, I'm not being a bother. This is a need. I don't need to apologize for having this need. I think we make a bigger deal out of asking for things than what other people really think. We think the whole class is going to turn around and look at us and be like, that girl is annoying. We just dramatize it in our head of what it actually is. And of course it wasn't. She was in the middle of teaching. I just told myself, what if I could do this in a truth-filled way that honored the reality of I had a need, but was still respectful and kind. I went up to her and she was teaching and I just whispered in her ear, do you mind if I take one of those towels and where can I grab one? And she's like, oh yeah, it's over here behind the desk, right? And I ran out there and I got it and it came back. And those are the kind of things that we struggle with if we deal with this over apologizing or taking up space. I think we make a bigger deal out of them than they need to be. But we have to start by asking, what is it that I really am struggling with here? And for me, it was, I'm worried that I'm a bother. So when we're over apologizing, it's like we're trying to restore a connection, even when nothing was actually broken. She wasn't mad at me. People in the class weren't mad at me. This was something in my head. So what it is really about in these situations, fear of being misunderstood, a fear of being wrong, a fear of conflict. Conflict is very scary. If we've had conflict in our past, especially conflict that came out of nowhere that we didn't realize how it started, we take the blame for that and we're like, oh, I'm not doing that again. Fear of losing connection with other people, fear of abandonment. So it's not about communication. It really is about safety. It goes back to safety and the brain wanting us to stay safe. So if you see any of that in you, I want you to know that most likely there is a deeper pattern, and that pattern is people-pleasing. So in the next part of the episode, I want to do something very concrete. So I want to just do this little experiment with me, okay? Because there are things that you and I say all day long that are evidence of these sort of patterns in our language, in how we speak and how we sit and how we present ourselves. they're everywhere. And it's like when you start to notice it, you're like, wow, God. It's happening every day. So these aren't bad phrases. They can be kind, they can be respectful, they can be appropriate. But if you hear yourself using them all the time, especially when you feel unsure or intimidated, then that's worth paying attention to. So I'm going to categorize them into different areas. The first one is softening or shrinking. Okay, some of these phrases. I just wanted to. I just think. This might be wrong, but I don't know if this makes sense, but do you see how just and we're softening the blow? How that is shrinking our voice before we even speak. Now, I grew up and I was trained as part of my degree in journalism and in PR. I was trained to learn how to use the right phrases to help promote or present a topic in a way that is favorable. Not in a manipulative way, but a softening way, something that's hard, right? Teaching a client how to talk about a tough subject in a way that is letting the other person know that they feel seen and still presenting their point. So sometimes it was normal or it could be helpful to say these things, but it also, as if it's part of who we are all the time and how we interact normally with people, if that's our MO, then that is a sign of us shrinking or softening. Another group of phrases that we can use, or I can call this idea of permission seeking. These permission seeking phrases like, is it okay if I, or would it be all right if, or let me know if this is okay. Again, asking for permission for something that doesn't actually require someone's permission. It can, in a counseling session, these are powerful phrases because we are asking permission to be able to go deeper with a client, for example. But in everyday language, that's a different story. The intention behind these things, we might need to use that to be respectful in a certain situation, but is this how we are always talking to that person? Is it always that we come to them from that perspective? I remember I had a boss once where I was always making those kind of phrases with them. And I felt like I came in to his office always, okay, I'm so sorry for being here. I'm sorry for bothering you. I'm sorry for just existing. And I have this question and I hope that's okay. How does that present me as an employee? Do I seem confident? No. How do I expect him to treat me with respect when I'm careful about these things? So it goes back to what is really there? A fear of upsetting someone, a fear of angering them, a fear of not being liked, a fear of being judged, a fear of losing that connection. It's all about fear and the ways that our very smart brain has come up with to keep us safe. Another category, overapologizing. I mentioned some of those a few minutes ago with sorry to bother you, but just sorry, quick question. I'm so sorry for asking. I'm so sorry. We feel like we're helping the other person for doing this. But you don't really need to say that because we want them to say, oh, you don't have to be sorry. Oh, we want them to say that to reassure us. But it's like we're apologizing for our presence, our needs, our voice. We're apologizing for things that they cannot give us worth for. Does that make sense? If someone says you don't have to be sorry for that, right? It does have some weight because we're in a relationship with them. But ultimately, God defines my needs, my presence, my voice. I don't need to apologize for having an opinion in those things. Now, I don't need to be rude. I don't need to speak harshly. We are speaking the truth in love. We're speaking with the confidence of Christ. We don't need to apologize for our presence or our needs. Overexplaining is another category. Just to give you some context, right? Just to give you some context. Or the reason I'm saying this is I didn't want you to think that, these phrases, You're trying to manage how the other person interprets you. Fascinating conversation today in the Emotional Confidence Club. We're talking about people pleasing this month. And I had this realization that when we do these sort of things where we say, I didn't want you to think this, or I'm just giving you some context, ultimately, the root of these things and the root of people pleasing is we are manipulating. We are manipulating another person. That sounds kind of mean and rude. We're like, I'm not a manipulator. They're the manipulator, right? But really, if we're saying, I'm trying to keep you from being mad at me, so I'm just doing damage control. I'm trying to prevent you from coming back and making me feel less than. It's this protection of management, of manipulation. And again, manipulation, that's kind of a trigger, hard word to hear. But it's not ultimately what we're doing. God wants us to be kind and he wants us to be clear. I love that Brene Brown talks about being kind and clear. Kind is clear and clear is kind. Be kind, be clear, and that's it. Leave the rest for them to figure out. They may talk about you. You could present it perfectly. You could show up perfectly, and they could still think you're crazy, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're wrong. We need to let that sink in. We think we're trying to prevent and keep everything steady by saying these phrases, but the reality is it's not just about our perception. We have the assumption that somebody is this neutral, perfectly receiving person, but in communication, when we speak something, that message is going through the air, filtering through their brain, and going through their own attitudes, perceptions, emotions, like what they're feeling that day. Are they happy? Are they tired? Are they sad? All of that is being filtered. So our words are not being received by a neutral chasm where we have to take responsibility for all of that. They could be receiving it in a way that even if we were to present it, quote, perfectly, it's not gonna be the way they receive it. They can still be mad. Great example of this is Jesus interacting with the Pharisees. Jesus spoke perfect truth. He spoke in kindness. Sometimes he got angry. We're not going to say that. Didn't mean you can't be frustrated. But he spoke truth to them. And they had their filters, right? He didn't apologize for the truth. He spoke the truth that his father told him to speak. They took those filters in and chose to still be offended, be mad to the point where they killed him. So, a realization that you and I have to have is that all of these things that we do, and I'm going to name a few others, within this way we speak, it is not a guarantee that we're still going to be safe. Hey, it's Alicia. Do you replay conversations long after they're over, or feel responsible for how others are feeling? Or how about this? Say yes when you really just want to say no? If you're stuck in that cycle of people pleasing and feeling responsible for everyone else, you are not alone, and there's a reason that your brain keeps going back to these patterns. That's exactly why I created the People Pleasing Check-In Workbook. It's a simple, self-guided assessment with powerful coaching questions, the kind I ask my clients, to help you understand what's really driving your people pleasing, so you can finally see your patterns more clearly, understand what's behind them, and recognize how they're affecting your relationships and everyday peace. Because understanding the patterns is the first step to getting free from people pleasing. If you're tired of the overanalyzing, the ongoing guilt, and the pressure to keep everyone happy, grab the People Pleasing Check-In Workbook and start your path to more peace, healthier relationships, and renewed confidence. Find it at aliciamichelle.com/people-pleasing. That's aliciamichelle.com/people-pleasing. Right? It's not a guarantee. And that's why there is not freedom in doing this, because we are still a slave to to someone else and their wishes, when we can remove ourselves from it and just speak and just let it be and let them think what they want, let them react how they want. And we are like, I got my eyes on you, Jesus. Boom. Right? Okay. Let's talk about a few other phrases. This last category, peacekeeping. I'm going to call them peacekeeping phrases. We say, it's totally fine when it's not. Or we say, whatever works best for you, or no worries at all. There are times when it doesn't matter. I find the older I get, the less I'm concerned about, well, it has to happen at this time, and it needs to happen this way, and this person needs to say this, and we need to go here. I truly get, by God's grace, I've become more and more, it's totally cool with me. But there have been times, and there still are times, when I am like, it's totally fine, no worries. And it's like, it feels easier to say that than to say, actually, it's kind of annoying that it took you 3 days to respond to my text when I really needed an answer today. I would love it if you could answer me about that. It doesn't have to be mean in how we say it, but just the reality of, yeah, it was a little inconvenient that this happened, but I'm willing to flex with it. I'm not mad at you, but yeah, sure. We don't have to prioritize what we think is keeping someone else comfortable over our own honesty. And that's really what's happening, is we're saying, I'm just trying to keep you comfortable so you're not mad at me, and I'm going to jeopardize my willingness to be truthful. Oh, that hurts just even saying it out loud. Right? I'm jeopardizing my willingness to be truthful for what I believe will be your perceived comfort. And again, they could still be like, no, I'm not comfortable. Or God may be calling us, if this is a repeated pattern, he might be calling us to say, you know what? It's time to step up and say, it really isn't okay that you've come in late to work 3 times. I'm not going to say no worries. I'm not going to say it's okay that you turned in this project late again and caused our whole team to be disrupted. Because maybe one time it's an accident, things happen, but this is a pattern, and I need to call you out on that. God might be calling us out of what we feel to be someone else's comfort to be that honest person. So, bringing it all together, the phrases themselves aren't the problem, and I hope you hear that. We can say some of these things and mean them in a genuine way, and they can be healthy. We don't need to just come and bulldoze into a conversation. It can be very helpful to say, I just want you to know this. I hope that it's not harmful for me to say blah, 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 right? These can be helpful, but if they are a regular part of our speech, especially in the relationships where it's just like over and over, this is how we speak to this person, that's a signal of what's happening underneath. And so it's creating this pressure over time to earn our place, to explain ourselves continually, to make ourselves acceptable. And that is exhausting. That's exhausting. And that's a loss of confidence, because we're always like, okay, I just have to dance around to make sure that they're not going to be upset with me. I have been in that place so many times, and it is just miserable. That's not a way to live relationships. It's not a way to live friendships. One of the things I love about being in my 50s is a lot of my friends are in the same place as me, where we're just like, you know what? If I say something that bothers you, just tell me. We don't have to dance around it and pretend that we're all good and everything's happy when we're not, and then talk about it to our husbands later. Just talk to me about it. I'm not offended. I know I'm not perfect. Let's just talk about it. And man, that just brings freedom to just be ourselves. Just be free to be me and to call someone else out. The relationship is not jeopardized. Relationship is not jeopardized. That's not a relationship that we have with every person, of course, but if we have that trust and that security, we know that we're not going to be abandoned. Man, how that grows honesty and truth in relationships, how that grows our confidence, how that allows us to be who God called us to be. So I want to remove shame here. If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I do this all the time. And now I got something else to feel bad about myself. Oh my gosh, it just never ends, right? I don't want you to feel that. I don't want you to feel that. I want you to understand that these patterns are learned, that they made sense, and they, in the moment, they're making sense while you're doing it, and they've helped you feel safe. That's it. They're understandable why they might be part of your vernacular. Okay? So now, the goal isn't to suddenly stop all of this. The goal is to notice. The goal is to get curious. And if we feel like we have to say those things, asking ourselves, what am I afraid might happen right now? What am I trying to prevent by phrasing these words this way? So try this, okay? Say what you want to say. Maybe speak it into a note on your phone or something. Maybe you speak it into there. And then just kind of go back and look and see, am I using some of these phrases that are softening the blow, trying to be a peacekeeper, trying to control someone else's reaction, trying to make myself look good and not as a fault, trying to prevent someone from talking about me? And those words might be, I just wanted to ask, things like that. Just notice it. I sent a text recently to someone, gosh, I don't even remember who it is now, but I was showing it to my husband later because it was one of those things where it was a vendor for something in our house. I don't remember what it was. But he said to me, just very lovingly, he goes, you sure say maybe a lot in this. Maybe if we just did this, or what if, is it okay if I was doing a lot of that? And he's like, you sure say that a lot. And I thought, interesting. Yeah, I do. And so I went back and I removed some of that. And just even sending it, I felt so much more confident in what I was saying. I knew that what I was asking was reasonable. I knew that I was doing it in a way that was still kind and loving and polite, but I wasn't trying to protect myself or manipulate the conversation. So if you're starting to notice these patterns, I want you to think about what a next step could be. Another step might be to do something like the people-pleasing check-in workbook that we've been talking about. This is going to help you connect the behaviors, help you understand how these patterns are showing up, to see what these triggers might be, and just to connect the dots, right? Because I think we all need to check in with ourselves sometimes and go, wow, this is really how I am. I want to try something different. And if you realize you want help actually changing these patterns, I've been sharing about this kind of briefly and little hints of this, but I would love to be able to help you get the deeper change that you need. We all need, not just you, I'm not pointing a finger at you, but that we all need through being able to change the inner, deeper need questions that are being trying to be fulfilled by this around needing to be loved, needing to be worthy, needing to be enough, needing to be seen, not needing to offend, like all that. But I'd love to help you rewire the thoughts around that, get solid around that in a way that's meaningful and personal, and then to teach you how these patterns are showing up, how to set boundaries, how to say no in a way that is going to be from a place of freedom and from an inner confidence of changing the patterns inside. That's the work we do in the people-pleasing mindset makeover. And I would love to be able to help you in that. So the workbook, if you want to do the check-in, that's aliciamichelle.com/people-pleasing. And if you want to consider what it might be like to work together in coaching through the people-pleasing mindset makeover, then go to aliciamichelle.com/coaching. Final thing I want to say is that you may have these phrases and ways of speaking so patterned into your behavior where you're like, this is just how I am. This is who I am. I want you to know that's okay, but that you don't have to present yourself that way, even if you've always done that. This doesn't have to be a personality trait, so to speak. You're not trying to communicate better even. You're just, in these patterns, you're really trying to keep yourself safe. And so if we can understand that these patterns are about us trying to keep ourselves safe, not trying to be a good communicator, then I think that gives us that motivation to be like, yeah, I don't know if I really need to be like this anymore. Is this really what God is wanting me to be like? It's removing that trying to control and manipulate someone else through our words. So I hope that this was enlightening to you today and that you're able to see, hey, is this something that shows up for me? And you can take some time to ask God, what do you want me to do about this if this is something that's in me? So I hope that you can take that time to ask the Lord, am I doing these things? And if so, what would you like me to do as a next step? Doesn't have to be solving all these issues or completely removing all these things, but how can I be more aware of this? And what do you want me to do with that? All right, friend. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you back here next week for another episode. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for joining me today. For full show notes and helpful next step resources, visit aliciamichelle.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, I'd be honored if you'd leave a 5-star rating and review. Thanks for being here. I'll see you back next week.